My guest today is Mr. ALVIN Brunson with the Center for Cultural Education. And ALVIN, tell us a little bit about how long you've been in Baltimore.
Well, I've personally been in Baltimore since 1958.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit about the Center for Cultural Education?
Gladly. The Center for Cultural Education is a nonprofit 501c3 cultural organization. And our mission is to educate people of all ages and races about Baltimore's African American. Our center actually performs cultural and historical research for businesses, for schools, for churches. We actually have African American Traveling Museum of Baltimore.
Okay, you want to tell us a little bit about the Traveling Museum?
Traveling Museum of Baltimore. The African American Traveling Museum highlights and spotlights African Americans from Baltimore who have made significant contributions to our city, to our state, and to our nations. And I actually brought about 4 exhibits with me that I hope we'll get an opportunity to talk about later. Our Traveling Museum travels to schools, colleges, churches, senior centers, nursing homes, after-school programs, libraries, museums, prisons, you name it. 9 times out of 10 we've been there. Normally during Black History Month, of course, that's our busiest season with the Traveling Museum. And we do a lot of federal, state, and local government agencies.
Okay, wonderful. What about some of the other programs? I understand you have this summer you were responsible for the Jazz Heritage Festival at Legend Park.
Legend Park. Well, just before I talk about Legends Park, what I wanted to talk about is back in March of 2004, we did a tribute to the Left Bank Jazz Society, and you were a part of that tribute. The tribute was held at Sojourner Douglas College, and of course you know I'm on the faculty there at Sojourner Douglas College. I teach courses in Baltimore's African culture, and we did a tribute to the Left Bank Jazz Society. And for those that don't know, this is the Left Bank Jazz Society's 40th anniversary this year. They were founded in 1964, so we felt obligated to pay tribute to that organization, and our tribute was a jazz reception. We actually had a jazz concert, and one of Baltimore's jazz legends, Ruby Glover and Friends, was the feature.
She had to be there.
It was
awesome.
Great. It was really, really nice, and it was held right at Sojourner Douglas College. We followed that up with our Jazz and Heritage Hour.
Okay.
And you're very familiar with our Jazz and Heritage Hour, but our Jazz and Heritage Hour is first Friday. It's held at Union Coffee House, which is located at 1201 Druid Hill Avenue, right across the street from Bethel AME Church. And once a month, we do live jazz there. We serve a full course meal, and one gets to learn a little bit about Baltimore's Black history and culture. We also have poetry.
Exactly.
Margaret Locklear is our poetry coordinator, our poetry talent coordinator. The last activity that our center does that I wanted to mention is we have a partnership with the college in that we teach courses in Baltimore's Black history and culture. And to the best of my knowledge, we are the only school in the city of Baltimore and the state of Maryland, where one can actually go at and learn about Baltimore's Black history in college. So we kind of.
Excellent. Can you tell them what type of subjects you teach?
The actual course is called Exploring Baltimore's Black History and Culture. And we cover Baltimore's musical heritage. We cover Baltimore's actresses, actors. We cover Baltimore's historic African-American sites and attractions. It's a course that is a combination of lecture, field trips, guest speakers. We actually have video. We have audio. It's a really nice class. Students actually get a chance to learn about the city that they were probably born in, grew up in.
And tell us some more about the Traveling Museum itself. What do you offer there?
The African American Traveling Museum, again, that's probably our hottest program. We get requests from different organizations, different agencies to actually bring the Traveling Museum out. Our center conducts, it's called the Thurgood Marshall Billie Holiday Walking Heritage Tour. It's a walking heritage tour which travels along the Pennsylvania Avenue corridor. It's a 1 square mile. It's 60 minutes in length, and we actually cover 14 historic African-American sites and attractions. The top is actually Thurgood Marshall's childhood home. And we actually travel to the Ideal Savings Bank, which is on Drill Hill Avenue. It's the oldest African-American savings bank in the state of Maryland. We travel to Union Baptist Church and Bethel AME Church. Those are two very historic churches in Baltimore. One of our tour stops is the Elks Church, which was founded in 1928. One of our stops is Booker T. Washington Middle School. It's a list. Oh, and I have to mention, we actually go by the Billie Holiday statue, which is in the 1300 block of Pennsylvania Avenue. Right from there, now you have the Royal Theater Marquee.
Right.
So that's actually one of our tour stops. It's an awesome tour, but we also do bus tours.
Okay.
We get calls from people who are interested in doing family reunions here in Baltimore, and they'll call our center. We would like for you to show our family of 300 people some of Baltimore's heritage assets.
Oh, wow. How do you get funding for these programs?
Most of the time, the funding comes out of. I have received some small grants from the Maryland State Arts Council. The Maryland State Arts Council has been very supportive with the Center for Cultural Education efforts. Now, but in general, on a larger scale, African American nonprofits normally don't get funding because there is what I would call disparity and inequity in grant funding.
I see. But I've noticed that there's been an upsurge in African American tourism in Baltimore, and a lot of people are trying to get in on it. How do you feel about it? Oh, and people, as you can see, this is the open forum, and we have people coming and going all the time. We have a handsome audience with us today. Alvin, we want to get back to the grant issues.
Well, you had asked me about cultural tourism as it relates to African Americans in Baltimore. Baltimore is rich in heritage assets. But what seems to happen is that the African American nonprofits that want a piece of that pie, per se, we get a small piece of that big pie. Frederick Douglass, let me give you the Frederick. He had to fight the house dug for crumbs. That was African American nonprofits in Baltimore trying to get grant funding. We have to fight for crumbs. The larger European nonprofit organization gets hundreds and thousands of dollars, and we get almost nothing. And what we do get, we have to fight over.
Okay, so what do you think we need to do to
Um, how do you change racism?
I mean, we're talking about government funding, we're talking about people from the private sector to
See, it's almost like a catch-22. On one hand, African American nonprofits we're told that the reason we don't get funding is because we don't apply for it. But that's not true, because then when we apply for it, we get rejected. That happens day in and day out. So I don't really have a concrete answer in terms of what could be, because you're talking about something that's out of my control.
Well, we can take a moment and just, say to the people out there that we, as a people, can just, get more involved and contribute whatever we have, be it money, be it experience, be it knowledge, whatever.
I think one of the things that would help is that if we would look at the work that African Americans nonprofits do, value in that work, and if we see the value in that work, then we should actually advocate. We have enough advocates out there.
Okay, well that's exactly what we try to do here at the Great Blacks and Wax, is to put out the information on those folks who have made a significant difference in our culture and in our history. And that's pretty much what we can do, is just continue to advocate that. It may have to take its own time, its own pace. But I love what you're doing.
Thank you.
And it's been, because I did grow up on Pennsylvania Avenue, and I was part of that migration from the South and along that. We call that our Pennsylvania Avenue.
To call it the Delta. One of the things that I wanted to mention, and you may have heard me talk about it in the past, we have what we call the Spend Pledge. And the Spend 10 Pledge simply says that we, as African Americans, will spend $10 a week with another African American owned business. That would help tremendously. When you look at the fact that in Baltimore City, we have roughly 600,000 people that live here, and out of that 600,000, which comes to about 360,000 people.
Okay.
Now, if you can get 360,000 people to spend $10 a week, that's a bit of money. If you can get our people to spend at least $10 a week with an African American owned business, you don't have to worry about an African American business in Baltimore City going out of business. And Margaret, let me just say this. If we could get black people to spend $10 a week in a black business or with a black business, African American nonprofits like the Center for Cultural Education would not have to depend on it.
True. Well, we have a gift shop here at the Great Blacks and Wax. You don't have to go downtown or to any other place to find what you may need. We have t-shirts, we have mugs, we have African artifacts, whatever your heart desires. So if you're ever down here, take a look at our gift shop. Okay, folks, as you know, we have the Blacks and Wax Open Forum, and we have a few guests in the audience that may have a few questions for Alvin. Michelle.
I was looking at your class and wanted to ask you about the art entertainment.
Yes, ma'am.
From prison to Broadway. What was that all about? Because I believe that was before my time.
Oh, that was a play.
Really?
That was a play that was done, I think that it was done in 1984, roughly about 20 years ago. And on that actual picture, there's a picture of one of Miss Locklear's friends. His name is Charles Dutton. Mr. Charles Dutton had just gotten out of prison. He went from what we call from jail to Yale. He had been locked up for about 8 or 9 years, and while he was incarcerated, he took up acting. And once he was released from prison, he got shipped to, I think first he went to Towson University, and then secondly he got a scholarship to Harvard. He finished his acting in school, then he started doing Broadway, and he went from Broadway to the television screen, he went from the television screen to the movie screen. And I don't know whether or not you watched The Corner, and I think it was The Corner.
Yeah, as a producer, director.
Right.
Sure.
So Charles Dutton has gone on to do great things.
Is that the one that had the show called Rock?
Exactly.
Oh,
Right.
really? That's
Right.
him?
That's him with hair.
Oh, okay.
And we like to talk about Charles Dutton because we always tell people it's not how you start, it's how you finish. You know, it's not about how you start out in life, it's about how you finish. So he's going on to do great things.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, then. Are there any other questions from the audience? Okay, Cynthia?
Thank you. And welcome, Mr. Price.
Thank you.
Displays here, and sticking with entertainment, I see Monique,
Uh-huh.
Jada, Tara, Dobson, and Rollins. And I know some of their story, but I'm not quite sure about the soldier's story. Could you give us a little information on that?
Sure. A soldier story was one of Howard Rollins. Let me talk about Howard Rollins first. Howard Rollins was from Baltimore. He grew up right on North Avenue, in Towson. There's some debate about whether he got his start in acting at the Arena Players or at the
Crown Public Television?
no, down on St. Paul Street, the Spotlight Theater. If you talk to the people at the Spotlight, they say he got his start there. If you talk to the people at the Arena Players, they'll say he got his start there. The fact of the matter is he got a start, and Howard Rollins went on to do great things. A Soldier Story, if I'm not mistaken, was his second movie. He actually came out his first movie, and that came out in 1980. Awesome movie, and it talked about life for African New York during the turn of the century, during the 1900s, and it talked about racism and how he was discriminated against because he drove a T-Model Ford, which very few people had in 1904. His second major movie was A Soldier Story, and that was a story that was mistaken. It was about soldiers, black soldiers who fought during World War II, I believe, during World War II, and the racism and the discrimination that they faced being in a segregated army.
Dave?
Okay.
Continuing with the soldier story, I think there's a political note there. Wasn't Franklin Delano Roosevelt in charge of the United States as president? And why he thought of to be so great for blacks when there was a segregated army?
Well, actually, the president at that particular time, I believe it was President Harding. Didn't we have a president last name Harding?
Yes.
President Harding was the president at that time. So I can't really answer your question in terms of why Roosevelt was looked at in such a huge figure.
You have one question for us, and then Cynthia, we can get back to you. Michelle, my fault.
Can we cut for 1 second, Aaron, if he could, if he doesn't mind? Okay. Yeah, and Aaron is a singer, so ask me a musical question.
Tupac is back there.
And son.
Who was the soft tones? Mr. Alvin,
Yes, sir.
I see over there you have a picture of Mr. Tupac.
Okay.
Could you give some, for some of us older people, the significance of Mr. Tupac being in your exhibit?
Okay. First of all, before I mention Mr. Baltimore has a very rich musical heritage. Baltimore musical heritage spans over 100 years, dating back to the 1900s, Lake, up to the present, with artists like Mario, Drew Hill, Rough Ends, and I can go on. Baltimore has turned out at least 40 African American recording artists. And I try to find some of their music and listen to their music and just learn some of the music of artists that came out of Baltimore. Tupac Shakur is actually Baltimore. He is not from Baltimore. He was actually born in New York, but he came to Baltimore to attend Baltimore for the performing arts. And while he was here in Baltimore, he befriended Jada Pinkett Smith and a slew of other actors, singers. So that's why we actually spotlight him, because he's to Baltimore.
Okay, how can me and my children No, first of all, you have to pay to get into your exhibit, and what is the traveling fee for the,
Bus tour.
right.
If you want to.
Okay,
You know,
sure.
I'm asking for me and my family.
Sure.
If I wanted to take my kids with me on your exhibit, how much
How much would it cost? The Billie Holiday Thurgood Marshall Walking Heritage Tour,
Yes.
that fee is $8 for adults and $5 for children. Our traveling exhibit, we actually bring that to you. Say, for example, you wanted me to bring it to your son's or your daughter's school. We would come to your school, or come to their school. We would set up the exhibits on easels in the gym, library, hallway, and we would educate people on Baltimore's Black history and culture. And I have to say this, we actually bring music with us when we bring the Traveling Museum out, because we want people to learn who some of these Baltimore artists are that I just mentioned. So it's an experience where you get a chance to learn about some of the people who made significant contributions and also learn some recording artists. That fee is $140 per hour.
It's worth it.
And actually, you spend a couple of hours there with the kids.
We can present up to 3 hours. Up to 3 hours. Schools, depending on their budget, some schools book us for 1 hour, some schools book us for 2 hours, some schools book us for 3. It depends on a school's budget and at the school.
Well, how can I go about to find out if my daughter's school have a budget so I can get you there?
You would have to go through their school principal.
Okay.
That's what I would strongly suggest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Sure.
much.
Thank you.
I would know that there are a lot of different talents in Baltimore, and looking at your exhibits, and now I'm focusing on the restaurants that are, could you enlighten us on some of the businesses that we have
Sure.
in Baltimore?
Some of you may or may not know that the Yellow Bowl is the oldest African American restaurant in Baltimore City. It opened in 1968, and it's been going strong since then. But we have a lot of other restaurants in Baltimore that do very, very well. We have Heaven's Gate, which is on West North Avenue. That restaurant seems to be doing pretty good. We have Micah's. You have Shug's Restaurant, which is in the 2500 block of Green. But what I want to talk about in terms of restaurants are the restaurants that have closed within the last 2 years. Baltimore, for some unforeseen reason, is losing a lot of good fine dining restaurants. For example, Sydney is at 1613 East Baltimore Street. They have closed down. Cajun Blue, which is a full-service Cajun restaurant in Cherry Hill, they have closed down. Courtney's is right outside of Baltimore City. It's right on Liberty Road. They have closed down, and I'm missing one. I know we've lost 4 good restaurants in the last 2 or 3 years. And I can't figure out why. If you bring your family in from North or South Carolina, I think you would want to take them to a nice African-American fine dining restaurant. Well, right now, where are you going to take those now? And I'm going to say it again. I believe one of the reasons that they are closed is because we, as a people, $10 a week with a black-owned business, you wouldn't have to worry about those restaurants going out of business.
That's true. Okay, for the commercial, we'll be right back. Okay, folks, we're back with Alvin Brunson from the Center for Cultural Education. Alvin,
Yes.
I understand you had a question you wanted to ask.
Yes, I wanted to ask the audience, they've gotten an opportunity to preview the exhibits. I just wanted to know if they had any feedback, what they think about the exhibits, how do you like the exhibits?
Thank you, Mr. Brunson, very well. I was very enlightened. There are people here that I've seen because of television and the communications, but I didn't know their exact story. I didn't know that, I knew Tupac in his music scene, but I didn't know he had connections with Baltimore per se.
Okay.
And I'm looking at the restaurants and Courtney's that you spoke of, I frequented, and it was doing very well. Not only did they have good food, they also had wonderful entertainment. They had jazz, music, and all of it, so I'm hoping that with your enlightenment, that most of us will go out and attend and try to do what you're saying so that we can make these businesses thrive once again. Thank you.
Oh, Alvin, I also am aware of the fact that you hold a contest with your attorney. Want to tell them a little bit about that?
We have one exhibit. I didn't bring it today. This one exhibit has 40 performers at the Old World Theater, which was in the 1300 Avenue from 1921 to 1970. This one exhibit has, again, 40 people who actually performed at the Royal Theater, and we offer $1,000, and it's no joke. We offer $1,000 to anyone who can name all 40 performers on the exhibits. And we've been trying to give the $1,000 away for about 3 years now.
Hasn't happened.
Nobody has been able to prize yet. I guess they don't.
I'll get it.
I guess they don't need it.
Well, I want to share with Mr. Brunson. I did attend one of his classes as a guest speaker, and I have to admit that it was to have those young people sit there and watch me perform and to actually get something from what I had to say that kind of in my career as far as my poetry and stuff is concerned. But his class touches on every aspect of African American culture in Baltimore, and what fascinates me about him is passion for it. Aaron was also in the class with me. You want to talk a little bit about it, Aaron?
Mr. Brunson and Sister Margaret, it was a pleasure being in that classroom and watching the fascinating faces and just letting me know where my talent and in my preparation and being prepared. And it was kind of neat to be able to help each other out,
Exactly.
as well as artists, as well as teachers and people who are making positive images on people of color and just in the learning experience.
Exactly.
And so I don't-
Thank you.
I'm glad. And I usually, whenever I see young people at Sojourner Douglas, I even refer them to his class. And if any questions you have about African American history as far as Baltimore is concerned, Mr. Brunson.
Oh, thank you.
And I want to thank you. Okay, thank you for joining us today. And my guest, Mr. Alvin Brunson from the Center for Cultural Education. And thank you for
Thank you for
coming.
having me as a
I'm
guest.
really glad you. Okay, we're going to cover a lot in the future. We're going to talk about politics in our communities and what we need to do to promote that, voting. We're going to talk about the arts and entertainment, African American culture. With the holidays coming up, we have Kwanzaa coming, and Christmas and the like. So we'll look forward to seeing you again in the future.